Give us one more just because we haven't heard it in a while.
Here we go!
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another outstanding episode of JoFo in the Ring. I am your host, the one and only Harbinger of Truth, Jeremy Prophet, and I am joined by a very special guest, someone that I have a tremendous amount of respect for in the wrestling business, someone who I've had the pleasure of sharing the ring with, being on road trips with, someone who you might know from his time in Ring of Honor, from his time working behind the scenes in the WWE, and who is currently working behind the scenes making Impact Wrestling fantastically entertaining on a weekly basis. I am joined by the one, the only, Jimmy JACOBS. Jimmy, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for thinking of me and having me on your show. JoFo Podcast, just our effing opinion. Love it.
Yep. And, really glad to have you on here as a guest. You're someone who our paths have crossed on a number of occasions, both in the ring, out of it. And when people ask me about you, one of the things that always comes to mind is I feel you're probably one of the most intelligent, if not underratedly intelligent people in the wrestling business. One of the great minds. And I do hope once it's all said and done and, you're getting your Hall of Fame induction for whatever company it may be, there'll be tons of people that'll recognize you for your contributions and all the cool stuff that you brought to the table that, people might not give you enough credit for, but definitely you're someone who has given me a lot of sound advice and someone who I can see just, functions on a higher level than most of the people you come across in a pro wrestling locker room, let's say. So nowadays, your wrestling career seems to be secondary to your writing. Is that something that you enjoy? Has it always been something that you've enjoyed, the writing side of professional wrestling?
Well, I appreciate the kind words. Look, when I first started in the wrestling business, I had an aptitude for the storytelling process. And that's not to brag. That's not to anything. It's just to say, look, I wasn't good in the ring. I wasn't athletic, all these sort of things. But I had an understanding of what this is supposed to look like storytelling-wise. With the drama involved and a certain amount of creativity put in that as well, and that just happens to be what I'm good at. So I always gave creative input in. When I look back at my career in Ring of Honor, so much of it was co-collaborative, and on all the smaller indie companies I worked for throughout the years, I was just a part of the process. And I found my niche in wrestling, 6-7 years ago when I went to WWE. Sorry, Don Callis. I'll call you later.
He can wait.
Sorry, Don. I found my niche in wrestling when I went to write for WWE in 2015, and while I perform when people ask me to come put on tights, the truth of the matter is I'm more available behind the scenes than I am in front of the camera.
No, it's definitely good to have the two skills to be able to be so versatile in wrestling, and that'll make you an asset to just about every company that you're a part of. You're more than just a body that's there to take bumps and entertain for 10 to 15 minutes. So definitely makes you an asset. I know that when we had first met, we got the chance to work. We didn't really get the chance to talk that much before working. That was in Boston, if I remember correctly. But I got a good sense that, in ring, you were very good at the storytelling aspect. You more or less put together the whole match. And it was cool that we got to work together. With that said, I had known of you for a long time. I think I first discovered you through Ring of Honor and then through Wrestling Society X, where you had the DIFY team with Tyler Black, a.k.a. Seth Rollins. And it was cool for me to get to work with you, but it was really after the match when we talked and I got to pick your brain about everything that we did in there that, I really got a sense of, wow, this is somebody who, knows the finer aspects. And I know this whole interview might sound like me just, putting you over, but really you are someone who had a big impact on my career and someone who I think the wrestling business needs a lot more of. So you had started off as the wrestler, went into the writing. Was there a part of you when you made that jump that missed the wrestling part of it?
No. When I went to write for WWE, I was done wrestling. I was done. I was freaking done. I thought I would probably never do it again. Of course, those are bold words for any pro wrestler to say. What I missed about it when I got to WWE was, there's a certain change, right? So as a performer, the buck stops with you. Like, it doesn't matter what anybody says beforehand, what anybody thinks something should look like, what anybody else wants you to do. The buck stops with you. You're the one that goes in there and makes the decisions, creatively to perform how you're going to perform. And as a writer and producer, it was a bit like, you prep the guy the best you can, but then you kick him out of the gate and hope the horse, finishes the race. And I missed that aspect of it because there were certain performers that I worked with that just, everybody there was great. But some guys aren't promos. They're not good promos. There was plenty of times where I produced somebody and just went like, why aren't I out there? Can you just like tag me in? I'll do the promo and then you go and do the rest of it. But I didn't miss being a wrestler, and I didn't miss performing per se for the first two years and change that I was there.
Mm-hmm. Now, to a lot of people who follow me out there, you may have seen that I had done an interview with Jimmy. It was kind of impromptu, but the last one I did, it was on the Hannibal TV at an event that we had both been on. I had a little bit more time to prepare for this one. And looking back at that, I kind of asked you about the writing process and a few little anecdotes. But one of the things I feel I would have liked to ask you, and I'll ask you now, is how did that come about? Like, were you given a formal audition? Was it you that reached out to the company? Was it someone that said, hey, I know this guy who I think could really add to the creative team? How did that actually happen?
Yeah, in the summer of 2014, I kind of had an epiphany that my wrestling career was going to be over and I was going to go be a writer for WWE. And once I had that epiphany / made that decision, and that it was a decision, it was one of the easiest things I'd ever done in my life as far as once I made the decision that this was going to happen. It was just, I walked right in. In December of 2014, I called Daniel Bryan and Joey Mercury, and I said, hey, I'm booked as an extra for some upcoming dates for WWE, but I'm not going there to get a job as a wrestler. I'm going there to get a job as a writer. And I need you guys to do whatever you need to do to put me in the position to get this, right? This was me after all my over 16 years in wrestling, 15 years in wrestling. I called in my favors. I called in my favors. I built the goodwill and I said, this is it. I'm good at this. Please help me out. And Joey and Brian both did, man. They brought me up to Dave Kapoor, who's the Ranjan Singh, who you might be familiar with. He was the manager of the creative team at that point, and they brought me up to him. They said, "Hey, this is Jimmy Jacobs. He's a genius. He belongs on your team." And that was just getting my foot in the door. From that, after that, I had to, apply for the job like anybody applies for any job. I had to give my resume. And most people's resume doesn't involve, IWA Mid-South heavyweight champion, but mine did. And I had to do some interviews, do some sample writing, and they hired me. So
how long did it take for them to hire you?
I think I gave them my resume in December, or probably December. Had my first interview in January, and they called me saying they were hiring me at the beginning of March, and I started at the beginning of April.
Okay. Oh, pretty cool. So that's really good how you parlayed what was going to just be an extra appearance to wrestle, or maybe not, or sit around in catering like we do when we're extras, into actually getting that audition with them as a writer and then getting the job a month later. That's a pretty quick turnaround.
Well, yeah. I got booked as an extra. I hit up Tyler Blair, Seth Rollins, and asked him to get me booked as an extra, so then I could do this. It was all a part of the plan. Like I said, once I made the decision that this is what was going to happen, it manifested super quickly. I just put one foot in front of the other. It was like I had spent my whole wrestling career banging my head up against a brick wall over here trying to be a wrestler. And then I just pulled back and was like, oh, there's a door right here, and just opened the door. It was super easy.
Oh, very cool. And a little sidebar to you folks out there, Jimmy might be too modest to admit it, but he's actually one of the most successful extras in WWE history with that win that you scored over Eddie Guerrero in what I think was your first extra appearance.
That was, yeah, my first time working for WWE. I was 21 years old, and I just showed up to the show to hang out with my buddy Paul London. He was like, yeah, come and hang out with me. And they needed somebody to work with Eddie, and I got that opportunity. And in the history books, it says Jimmy Jacobs defeated Eddie Guerrero. So,
yep. It's something I always remember. That might have been, I'd already known of you, but when I saw that, I was like, oh yeah, that guy in Ring of Honor. Yeah, him. I know of him. Cool. So then they have you on the writing team. How many writers are there on the WWE team, or how many were there when you were there?
There's about 25 or so.
So there's 25 writers in total from top to bottom?
Yeah, roughly. You know, you've got your head writers. So there's two teams, right? There's a home team and a road team. So the home team, the road team goes and produces things on the road. We produce Raw, produce SmackDown. The home team stays at home and takes care of business there, starts working on next week's shows or makes whatever changes need to be made back in Stamford. And so there's the road team and there's the home team, and there's a head writer of Raw from the home team, head writer of Raw on the road team, head writer of Raw on SmackDown on the home team, head writer of SmackDown on the road team. So it's like there's a lot of different positions, right? And there's a handful of guys that are working on NXT. There's the handful of people that are working on 205 Live. I don't know if that's still the same way, but yeah, I mean, look, there's a lot of work to be done. It never felt like, man, we have too many people here, other than when you get 25 people into a room and try to brainstorm, which is a bad creative process, which we rarely did. Rarely did we have everybody in one place. Normally it's like, hey, there's 5 people over here working on the ideas for SmackDown, 5 people over here working on the ideas for Raw. So the work breaks up pretty fairly.
So were you assigned to the road team right out of the gates?
Right out of the gate, yeah.
Okay. Was that for any particular reason? Was that maybe because they knew you were familiar with the business already?
Yes, I believe so. And I was familiar with a lot of the guys there. Like, I was friends with a lot of the talent, which was a blessing and a curse. I think some people thought it was that it wasn't good to sort of keep me away from my friends, because there is a division between the talent and the creative, or the talent and the office, right? Mm-hmm. But they brought me on the road right away. I think feeling that, I already had a rapport with most of the talent, and my skill wasn't writing as such. There's some guys whose skill is like putting pen to paper, right? These guys are actual writers, so they might be better suited for the home team because they're going to be writing the promos, writing the scripts more than a guy on the road team, perhaps.
Mm-hmm. And I remember reading, and I brought this up in our last interview, that one of the things that got you noticed was when you had written a promo for Adam Rose. They had given him a segment, I think it was called the Rose Garden or something to that effect, some type of like an Entertainment Tonight style segment. And I remember seeing those, and I kind of like the Adam Rose character, but the promos, they had such viciousness in it. And anyone who knows me knows I love the hard hitting promos, like the Rock style promos, or like Chris Jericho style promos, where he really would go in on people. And when Adam Rose did that Rose Garden segment and went in on Tommy Dreamer's balding head and all the other things that were in there, and then I remember reading that you were the one who was assigned to write those for him. And right then and there, I could see that that was something that was pretty good. I mean, not to say it was game changing, but for his character that had been kind of dead in the water, that was a moment where I took notice of him. So it's cool to know that was your writing. Was that the first big task they gave you, or?
I mean, I don't know if I would consider that a big task, but Adam Rose and the boy, the Social Outcasts. That was the first thing that I was assigned to, like, this is yours. You know, before that, I'm just producing sort of random things here, random things there. But that was the first time it's like, these are your guys. You're with them. Every time they're on, you create for them. You collaborate with them. And that's the process there of just sort of, you know, as a newer writer, getting off the ground and, you know, you get experience being a kind of utility player, and then you start to get your own guys underneath, and then you start to work with the top talent, and that was the process. And I loved working with the Social Outcasts. Some of my favorite stuff was the stuff I did with them.
I mean, I remember some of their run, and yeah, they were four guys who were kind of doing their own thing, kind of floundering, and then putting them together gave them a bit of a boost. I remember, like, just little things. I don't know if they were your ideas, but I remember how, like, Adam Rose would call Heath Slater, like, the Crimson Werewolf or the Red Dragon or something like that. And they had a funny little dichotomy going on between those two. And then you had Curtis Axel saying, like, no, like, we should team and we should be like Axel and Rose. And I don't know if these were ideas coming from you, or they might have been ad-libbing some of that, but there were a lot of little nuances that
dude, it was so much fun and so ridiculous. I mean, I remember writing these things, like, laughing, like, this is hilarious. Like, the preposterousness of Adam Rose being, like, kind of like a little psychedelic, and he's giving everybody weird nicknames, like the Red Dragon and the what would he call himself? The Radical Mongoose, whatever. But it was good experience to work with those guys and have something that was kind of like my own, and you know, get used to the voices. And, you know, I wish it would have been more successful. There was a part of me that was, like, hoping that, like, one of the weird things we did would catch on, and these guys would start to become, like, a little bit of, like, an underground favorite, a bit like a Fandango, where they would get something that people like doing, but it never really transpired. But I freaking love those guys, and glad I got to work with them.
Well, I mean, it's still like 6 years later, and I remember some of those little things, some of those little seeds that you planted there. So it definitely didn't fall totally on deaf ears. Also, you got a ton of credit for the List of Jericho. And, you know, anyone who remembers Chris's last run, I think the first thing that would come to mind would be the List of Jericho and how over that got for something that was, you know, essentially just him putting somebody's name on a piece of paper that never really led to anything. But he put you over big in an interview, saying that, you know, you were responsible for a lot of that. How did that come about?
Yeah, so I was working with Chris, and we were starting to find his voice, right? So Chris came in as a babyface, doing the light up jacket, and then Chris, God bless him, always reinvents himself. And so we did a deal where, you know, Moxley, you know, like, destroyed his light up jacket, and then Chris was sort of in, I don't say in limbo, but he's trying to find this new character. And I think he had some ideas coming in, like calling people stupid idiots. He kind of came in with, but we're still just trying to, like, figure out what his thing was. And then he would do the gift to Jericho, drink it in, man. And we were starting to get in this vibe. And so we had an in-ring promo with Mick Foley one of these weeks. I want to say we're in Memphis. And he was going to come out. Mick Foley was the commissioner, and Chris was going to come out and air his grievances. And I go, well, if he's going to air his grievances, he should have a list of grievances. And then I thought, okay, maybe he has this list. And I started thinking about, in real life, Steve Corino has, like, the Corino shit list, right? If, like, you don't want to be on the Corino shit list, it's like the people that are basically dead to him. And I go,
I'm probably on there.
Yeah. And I go, well, what if Chris made a list like this, but he's so petty that anything that anybody ever does gets him on the list? And you go, that's good. And then, you know, you have a good idea when it starts to spawn these other ideas, like, oh yeah, he can do this, and he can do this with it, he can do this with it, and whatever. And I was like, this is good. And I was like, I think I got something. And I went to Chris in Memphis, and I pitched him this whole thing, and I go, yeah, and you can have this list. You can take pictures of people at the airport, and be like, this person cut in front of me in line. Now you're on the list or whatever. I'm like, you can make this whole thing. And he goes, so you're talking about doing this not just tonight, but doing this moving forward? I go, yeah, man. Like having this be your thing, and you call it the List of Jericho, like the Gift of Jericho, because he had just started doing the Gift of Jericho. Now this is the List of Jericho, and I pictured it as like a crumpled up piece of paper he kept in his tights, and he pulls it out. It's like, you know what, you're on the list. But Chris was like, no, this needs to be a visible thing, and I want to be able to hit people with it. And so he came up with that. He came up with you just made the list, and the whole cadence of, you know what happens, huh? You know what happens when you make fun of Chris Jericho's best friend, huh? You know what happens? He's great, man. Chris is great. And so that was a awesome thing that came together. And yeah, man, it was the most popular thing on the show for a while. When Chris became a babyface out of it, and they started ending the live events with Jericho, and he would put people on the list. That was the end of live events. Like the people, you gotta let the people go home happy. And so Jericho wins the main event, and then he says, "You know what happens, Phoenix? You know what happens when you're an amazing crowd? You just made the list! Yay!" We send the people home happy. Yeah, it was.
Wow, and it culminated with the Festival of Friendship. Did you have a hand in that too?
Yeah, I produced that. Some of that was Vince's vision. I saw it a little bit more like I wanted different people coming in. I remember a little bit more like the Rock, Mick Foley, This Is Your Life. Yeah, a little bit more like that. Because you need some conflict, right? You need somebody to, you need somebody for Jericho to like shit on, the old couple, like I had an idea of like you bring out like these two old friends like Herb and Marv, and Jericho's like, see, these guys are amazing friends. They're 90 years old. They've had a friendship for 70 years. We could have a friendship like that, Kevin. That's like our friendship. And Herb goes, oh yes, me and Marv are the best of friends. And Jericho takes offense to it. I'm sorry, but the best of friends? No. Kevin and Chris are the best of friends. Jericho and Owens are the best friends. You know what happens? You know what happens when you used to think you're a better friends than Chris Jericho and Kevin Owens, and like puts like old people on the list. Like that was my vision for it, which I thought would have been a little better. But Vince's vision was Chris gives Kevin presents. And I thought that was a little like, ugh. What are you going to do with that? And then I go, well, so basically the presents have to not land. They have like Kevin has to not like them. So because you need that conflict in there somewhere. But yeah. So I ended up taking Vince's general vision and then, writing it and rewriting it, writing it and rewriting it and producing the thing the day of. And yeah, freaking great.
And whose idea, if you remember, was it the final part where it's the list and it's the, why is my name on here? That I feel was really that's the iconic moment in that segment.
Yeah, I don't remember whose idea that was. I think that might have been Kevin's idea, actually. I think that was Kevin's idea. And it's interesting because you say that's the iconic part, and I agree. There's some fun stuff in it, but to me, the drama was always going to be when Chris gets excited. He goes, oh, a new list. And he looks at the list and he goes, why is my name on here? And then he turns it around. And that moment where he realizes his best friend stabbed him in the back. Like, that's the Shakespeare, man. Like, that's it to me. It's that moment. It's the moment he realizes he's about to be betrayed is the Shakespeare. And the day of we were in Vegas, and the day of, Vince wasn't there that day. And Triple H was in charge. And Triple H did not like all the Chris Jericho, Kevin Owens stuff. Because Kevin Owens was a Triple H guy, and Jericho was a little goofy for Hunter. You've seen NXT when Hunter was in charge. Yep. It was all serious stuff. And I think Triple H saw Kevin being muddled in this goofiness as not good for Kevin. So Hunter wanted to just have, like, in the middle of, Kevin starts to cut a promo and says, "Hey, Chris, I realize you tried to do all this nice stuff and I appreciate it," and something. And then Kevin just jumps him, attacks him. Like, Hunter hated the whole List of KO thing. He's like, "This is so goofy. Wouldn't it be better if he just jumps him?" And I remember being in the production meeting, like wanting to, like, lose it on just like, what the fuck? You can't do this. And I was like, I know, like, Jericho will take care of this. Jericho does, he's not going to stand for this. I know he's not going to stand for it. Even though Hunter's the boss that day, like, Jericho will go to Vince. And that's what happened. Like, Jericho texted Vince, who just go like, "Hey, we're doing the Festival of Friendship like you and I talked about, right? With this finish, right?" And Vince is like, "Yes, we're doing it like that." And so it was a weird day. There was a lot of tension there. And look, this happens. This isn't to point fingers at Triple H and say, "Oh, you're wrong," or "You're bad," or anything like that. It's just to say people have a different view on things. And it was scary for me creatively to go, "Oh no, we might lose, like, the moment of the whole thing." Because someone else has a different creative vision. And I'm glad that, Vince came through and, eventually Hunter sort of said, "All right, do what you guys are going to do." And it was a freaking home run. And I think Hunter really liked it at the end. I don't think he saw what it was going to be before that. But once he saw it, I mean, it was a freaking home run. That was, for me, when that promo was over, that was my, like, the highlight of my WWE career for sure.
Yeah, no, it was an outstanding segment, one that'll be remembered for years. But it's crazy to think that there was this, Cuban Missile Crisis-esque standoff of, which side is going to get what they want, and you guys double downing on yours, you and Chris, and managing to hit that home run. But I mean, that sounds like such a tense situation. Was there ever anything else that was like that, where there were really, or maybe you were butting heads with another writer or someone else's vision on a particular angle, anything like that?
I mean, a lot of times that would happen. I mean, look, I learned, and you have to learn very early on, not to fall in love with your ideas, because your ideas will get changed, and they will get changed. They will get changed again. Your job isn't to create your master vision. It's to do what Vince wants, right? And that changes. So there's often differences of opinion. The good thing about WWE is that it's Vince's land, and that's the bad thing about WWE. But he gets the final call. So there's no, when he says this is what we're doing, there's nothing else to do. You don't go, "No, Vince, we need to," it's like, no. Vince, the king has made his ruling, and that's it. So whereas, the what happened with the Festival of Friendship, that's partly because Hunter was there, and Hunter's not exactly the final call. So you can have these two creative forces like Jericho and Hunter sort of butt heads a little bit, so to speak. And I don't mean that in the, like, they're enemies, just they have different creative visions. You get to have Vince there to be the final call, and sometimes that's good for you and sometimes it's bad for you, but it's always good to know that there's someone here with a final say.
Yeah. Now, in our previous interview, you told me about your impression of Vince and how it changed from when you started, and, "Oh, I'm going to work for Vince, and, he's just a dude, and but then he became a boss as you started to work with him. Maybe you might want to enlighten this audience as to what that was like, just in more specific terms.
Yeah, when I first came there, I noticed that everybody was scared of Vince, and I didn't realize why. I'm like, he's a dude. He's just a dude. Yeah, sure, he's a billionaire dude, but he's just a dude. And I learned very early on that he's a crazy man. And look, Vince is a freaking legend. I don't want to take anything away from Vince McMahon. I am grateful that I get to sit here and talk about this with you because I had the opportunity to work with this guy. He's a freaking legend in so many ways. Everything you've heard about him is true plus more. What a larger than life character. But he's a crazy man. And I learned very early on that you're one weird interaction with Vince away from being fired or being in the doghouse or whatever. One of the writers very early on, the first month I was there, walked into Vince's office without knocking, and Vince wanted to fire him. And, Vince had said, come back with this, finish this thing and come back with it. And the guy, he leaves, he comes back with it and knock. And he wants this guy fired. This guy is now like one of the lead writers of Smackdown because he's freaking talented as heck. But all it takes is one weird interaction. I don't know if you remember when Titus O'Neil got suspended for like you remember this? Like they're all on stage for, I want to say it was Daniel Bryan's retirement.
I think
maybe
so. Sounds right.
Yeah, and Titus O'Neil like grabbed Vince in kind of like a joking way, and Vince didn't like it, and he got suspended.
Yeah.
And he loves Titus. Vince loves Titus. And so you're always one weird interaction with Vince away from being in the doghouse or being fired or whatever. And I was so scared to lose my job, that I became so trepidatious around Vince, which everybody kind of is. Everybody has their own way of dealing with it. But you know that you're trying to walk within these boundaries, because if you step one foot out of this boundary, Vince is going to be like, what? What are you? God, this guy doesn't get it. We need to get rid of him. What is he doing here? You just don't know. So Vince became a character that I started to become nervous around, which then just perpetuates the problem. So you go, now I've got to worry about how I talk to him. Now I have to worry about what I say. And now I'm going to say dumber things, and which is, which if you're in a creative process, you have to be allowed to say dumb things. It's so stupid. It's such a bad, Vince is great at a lot of things. He has such a bad creative process there. He says he wants people who think outside the box or whatever. But look, in a creative environment, this is why I appreciate Impact Wrestling, because I can fail there. I'm allowed to. I'm allowed to have bad ideas there. I'm allowed to say whatever it is that whether when you're brainstorming or you go, we got to try this. It's like, you got to be able to go for it. You can't censor yourself in the creative process. It's okay to say dumb things and somebody says, no, I don't want to do that. That's fine. No problem. But to create an environment where people are scared to say something out of fear of the boss going, God, this guy doesn't get it. Oh, God, what are you talking about? Why would you do that? And be berated for your idea. Well, then it's not worth it to put out a bad idea, or an idea that could be good, an idea that could be game-changing. That's the environment Vince has there.
Yeah. It's interesting because I think of the first time I met Vince McMahon. I was fortunate enough to meet him. I had been wrestling, but I just kind of met him as a fan at a hotel in Toronto after a Raw. And I remember seeing him, and this must have been about around 2005, 2006 or so, when he was, he wasn't the decrepit old man that we see on TV nowadays, this combination of Botox and growth hormone wrapped up in a wrinkly old Mr. Burns. But the Vince McMahon, when he was, still able to take bumps and cut a hell of a promo, God damn it. And I was pretty intimidated by him. I'll admit, like, I have a picture with him and I look absolutely terrified. I guess that helped me years later when I would meet him and I'm like, oh, well, I already met him. And I remember the first time I spoke with him and I said, I look forward to working for you someday. I just started wrestling, and he was like, well, kid, we look forward to having you with us. And, it's really this aura of wow. So I can see how being around him so often and, having that impression of him, having seen him on TV and everything can sometimes get to people. But the one thing I can't help but feel is that, like you said, he's the king. His say is final. So if you have an idea, no matter how good it may be or how unanimously good others may think it is, if he disagrees, then his say is final. But I kind of feel that might pollute or adulter the creative process, because if he's not open to people challenging his ideas that he feels are good, he's really just surrounding himself with a group of yes men. So did it ever feel like that to you, being on the team, that, hey, Vince just has his ideas and wants to be validated by having this team here as a sort of pool of people to get ideas from, but ultimately he's going to get what he wants?
I mean, that's basically what it is. And again, there's nothing, well, I'll say there's nothing wrong with it. There's a downside to it. Absolutely. But the alternative is you don't have somebody who has the final say, and you need somebody, like, it can't be a democracy. It has to be somebody's vision. Like the show you're doing, it has to be somebody's creative vision at the end. So in that respect, it's like, I understand. But in essence, yes, we were all the king's advisors. That's what we were. We were advisors to the king, and we give the king ideas, and he goes, yes, 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 no, 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 no. But that's the process, and I think that's more or less the process anywhere, to an extent, right? I mean, Tony Khan books the shows. He books AEW. He just happens to be doing what people think is a better job than Vince McMahon, and he does it by himself. And he gets advice from other people, but it's got to be one guy's vision.
See, I'm a firm believer that you got to be open to some challenging. Like, yeah. There has to be. You have the admiral of the ship, and then you have the XO that can overrule him, if I could use a Battlestar Galactica reference there. But you have that person who does have the power to overrule the one who's in charge. But maybe Vince doesn't want that. In any event, he also doesn't have competition. So maybe he's, just wants to put on a show that'll entertain him more than entertain the people that are actually watching. And let's face it, he's made more money than he can spend in the rest of his life, even if he lives another 70 some odd years. So I think, yeah, it's a show that's being put on to entertain him. I, being a writer myself, I think maybe I shared that with you, that I'm a writer, I'm a journalist. That's what I went to university for. Often envision, what would I be like on the creative team? And I think to myself, and I have this little theory where this is how I would have played it, which maybe would have been to my detriment, but Vince McMahon is this big, booming alpha male, in his mind, is, the be all end all of professional wrestling, whether that's true or not. But I feel like as a writer, I would kind of bring that same energy to the table and be like, come on, Vince, if I had an idea I believe in, I'd be like, do you want to surround yourself with a bunch of yes men, or do you want someone who's going to fight for their ideas? Where's that ruthless aggression? That would have kind of been my approach. That would have probably got me kicked off the team. But part of me kind of feels like, hey, maybe Vince might have appreciated that from someone.
Yeah, look, he would appreciate that once. That's what he would appreciate. He'd appreciate it one time. And then he goes, God, that kid's got balls. Oh, that's great. You do it again? God, this guy doesn't get it. Vince says he wants to be challenged. He just wants to be challenged just like this much. That's what he wants to be challenged. And woe be to you if you were to do that in front of everybody else, because there can be only one. You understand? There can be only one alpha male in the group, and that's Vince McMahon. And so don't try to challenge Vince in front of everybody. Like, look, if you're in a small circle, maybe, you're in a small group and you maybe just you and Vince, maybe. But again, you do it once. You do it once so Vince knows that you're not a complete pushover. You do it more than that, you challenge Vince more than that, and it starts to become, this guy doesn't get it.
That's a pretty good piece of advice there, definitely.
Yep.
So with your time on the writing team coming to an end, when did you feel the writing was on the wall, no pun intended, that this was no longer a good fit for you?
When I got out of rehab it was late May, right? Is that it? I went in April, got out at the end of May, or is it March? I don't know. Whatever. Spring of 2017, I went to rehab, and when I got out, I was excited and excited to be back at my job and be clear-headed. But it was difficult for me to manage that job without the filter of drugs like I did for the whole time I was there. Life is just more intense when you don't have that screen in front of you that just filters reality out. And it was intense. I was like, man, this is a rough job. Like, this is not pleasant. It's not pleasant without numbing my emotions and being, talked to the way I'm being talked to by Vince McMahon and all this sort of stuff.
Not to cut you off, but what were some of the rougher aspects? What made the job rough?
There's a lot of aspects to it. The thing that I'm basically referring to right now is the more or less the treatment of the writers, right? Vince, while we're Vince's guys, Vince wants all these writers. Also, he's not very respectful, and as such, we're the writers are the low people on the totem pole at WWE. So there's no problem with anybody, whether it's Hunter or Vince or whomever, to talk to and treat the writers like they're just pieces of shit. And that's not, look, I'm not saying it's super prevalent, but how much prevalence is too prevalent? How many times does somebody need to be to show that somebody has no respect for you whatsoever before you go, yeah, I don't know how much this is for me. And that became evident to me pretty early on when I wasn't on drugs, when different people are just yelling about different things and whatever. There's a handful of instances I have in my head that I go, yeah, of course I didn't want to be there. Of course. So yeah, in that last, I got fired in, I think, October of 2017. In the last handful of months, I knew in my head, I was mentally done with that place. Whether I would have made the decision to leave or not, I don't know that I ever would have, but I was mentally done with it. And when I got fired, it was a relief. It was a relief. And I look at it now, I go, what a blessing. But even in the immediacy, even when, I first thought it might be and I didn't think I was going to get fired for that picture, but I thought it might be a possibility. I was like, there's an off chance that I could get fired for this. And the thought of that was not like, oh no, I might get fired. The thought of that was like, wow, I might get fired. Imagine what else I can do with my life. Man, and there was an excitement to it. Yeah. So by the time I did get fired, it was like, great, we're done.
And on another note, you mentioned going to rehab. On that front, things have been going good now. You've been clean.
Yeah, man. It's like I don't like to exactly talk about it insofar as, so I'm a proponent of psychedelics. And so I don't fit nicely into with the sober crowd, because whatever, every couple months I take mushrooms or something. So there's not I'm sober guy, I'm 4.5 years clean, but that's how, because people define being clean by one group, by this like abstinence as such from all mind altering drugs, although people will still take, prescription pills, like, oh, the doctor prescribed me these antipsychotics, antidepressants, which are freaking drugs as well. Mm-hmm. But so with that asterisk of it, yes. Yeah. And it's way better. It's, I was talking to somebody yesterday about this, after, Jimmy Rave died this week, and he struggled a lot with, with addiction, obviously. And I was talking to somebody about it and just going, man, it's so much better being on the other side of that, where my life isn't, the number, for years, the number one priority was, finding drugs. Number one, opioids, Percocet, Vicodin, whatever, because everything else cascades from that. Because I'm going through withdrawals otherwise if I don't have it. So find the drugs first, and then I can do whatever else. Because if I'm going through withdrawals, I'm not doing anything else. So drugs number one, everything else comes down from that. And it's so amazing to be on the other side of that sort of thing. And the past 4.5 years, I've spent, working on myself. And, I've been on, whatever you want to call it, a journey of self-discovery, a spiritual journey, self-betterment, whatever you want to say. And it's wonderful. Yeah, life's good.
No, it's good to hear, and I'm glad to hear that you're on that journey. Things are going good. I got to admit, when we first met, you never hid the fact that that was a part of your life, and you told me some stories, some that I don't think there's any need to share with the audience, but of your going down that path, and like you said, that was always the priority for you. I'll admit, I didn't know you too well, but that had me worried for you. So I'm glad that that's something that's in the past, and that you're moving on to become the best you possible. Kind of wanted to just.
Yeah, I mean, that's the goal, right? And look, I don't even frame addiction as, even when I went to rehab, I knew it had nothing to do with drugs, right? It doesn't. Drugs are, let's say, a coping mechanism to avoid dealing with other things. And it's a distraction and a coping mechanism. It's a tool that one uses to, manage emotions, manage parts of themselves that they can't manage otherwise. Mm-hmm. And so much of my life now is about an increase in awareness in those things of, seeing when I'm out of alignment, learning about myself to understand why I do exactly what I do. And that's what I'm into. That's I'm in groups, and I read books and all this sort of stuff. Like, I think the journey of self-discovery, some people might call it a journey of healing, is the most important thing that each person needs to do, because without that, we have no idea the sort of what we put out into the world. So many people think they're righteous and good, and while at the same time demeaning others, yelling at others, putting others down, and they don't realize that in their pursuit for righteousness, goodness, that really what they're doing is creating division and this, and creating to divide and putting hate and vitriol out in the world. So I think it's so important, and that the proper level of analysis for changing the world is at the level of the individual.
Mm-hmm. And I really don't want to dwell on the topic too much, but I noticed that when you had mentioned opioids, it made me think of a lot of people that I've known in the wrestling business, and a lot get into addiction because of things that happen in wrestling, because of injuries, and it starts with one thing and leads into others. Was wrestling a contributing factor to your drug issues, or did that predate your time in the business?
No, it was a contributing factor insofar as I started doing drugs because I thought it was funny, because, like the old time wrestlers, pop some pills and, whatever, it was like a parody. But when I took the first 2 Vicodin in my life, I was like, oh, this is it. This is how I want to feel all the time. So ultimately, any drug use and any sort of addiction is all just a mask for something else. And drugs are fortunate to be addicted to, insofar as you can't do it for a long time, right? It's not a good medium to long-term solution for anything. But there are people that are addicted to pornography, or addicted to their phones, addicted to watching TV, addicted to the, their unhealthy relationships, and they will continue those sort of addictions for the rest of their life because it's not life-threatening. And so it's a bit of a blessing to be addicted to something that you have to confront or else you might die. And then that allowed me to peel back different layers of myself. So it's all part of the journey, which is lovely.
Yep. I want to take it back to the writing for a bit, because when I do these interviews or when I talk about anything in wrestling, I'm very outspoken on the writing because I find it odd that wrestling, I feel, is written differently than television, despite being a primetime TV show that's in competition with all the major shows on a Monday or on a Friday night. That here you have WWE putting out what is essentially a PG show, trying to compete with stuff on HBO and all the other stations out there that are a little bit more edgy. But also the fact that the stories, to me, I feel are kind of lost behind the wrestling, especially nowadays. I feel I'll turn on an episode, let's say 2-hour episode of Smackdown, and it's predominantly wrestling on there. It's not necessarily story progression. I remember I saw a quote from Bruce Pritchard, I think on the Monday Night Wars series, where he said, "Oh, it was great. We had Eddie Guerrero, we had Kurt Angle, Chris Benoit, all these guys. We could just have them go out there and do a couple 20-minute matches." And it's like, hey, that's like half the show that's already done. And I could never shake that quote, because I feel like a lot of times the writers probably rely on the wrestling as filler to not have to actually write stories and progression and whatnot. That's my view of it from the outside looking in. You were on the inside. Tell me, is that possibly a real thing that goes on where they will use the wrestling as filler because it makes the job easier?
Not because it makes the job easier. Look, everybody has different reasons they watch wrestling, and every wrestler has different upsides to them. There are some fans that like wrestling, and they like wrestling matches. And if you watch AEW, a lot of it isn't story driven. There's freaking cold matches on there all the time, but there are two guys that people really want to see. So, what story do you need for that? Well, none. Now, look, in WWE, you're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to have a cold match. You are not allowed to. So even if, you and I are going to wrestle and we bump into each other backstage and I spill coffee on you, it has some pretext to it. There's nothing that has no story. Now, certain wrestlers are going to be more valuable because they're good in the ring. And so for those talents, you want to put them in situations where they have longer matches. When you talk about your Eddie Guerreros and whatever, but that from your Bruce Pritchard quote. But you're always going to have stories in there. It's just what qualifies as a story in wrestling is it's a pretty low bar. That's the truth. If like I said, in WWE, it's considered a story if you and I are backstage, I spill coffee on you, and we go and wrestle. Now, does that really want to make the audience see you and me go at it? No, I don't think so at all. But it has to have that pretext to it. So I don't think there is a aversion to having storytelling in wrestling. I just think that the bar is set very low as far as what that storytelling entails.
Well, I mean, again, I get what you're saying. It's just that I feel, and maybe it's not necessarily the time that you were there writing, maybe it's more of a recent thing, but I watch the shows and I feel like, for one, there's not a lot of continuity, which I don't think has ever been WWE's strong point, that you can have people who are trying to slit each other's throats 1 month, the next month they're on the same team in a 6-man tag
because nobody remembers last month. That's you have to understand that Vince, first and foremost, is a promoter. He's not a storyteller. He's a promoter. It's about tonight, what's happening tonight, what am I going to put on the marquee tonight, how we're going to get people to watch tonight. That's all the show's about. So what happened last week is a little it's not as important as what, if you and I wanted to kill each other last week, but you and I teaming together this week is the best thing for tonight's show. You and I are going to team together this week. And that's what happens in WWE. I would look, I see a bit what you're saying. I'm sorry I interrupted you, but I want to put in that point. I would say, try to find a match that has no backstory to it, or story doesn't come out of it. Those are the sort of two things. Like, we might be able to get away with a cold match, probably not, but we might be able to get away with a cold match as long as it's leading to something else, right? So either it's going into something, it has context going in or story coming out of it. And you would be, I would guess, hard pressed / impossible to find a match on Raw or SmackDown that doesn't have that. I would guess, I would assume.
Well, I'd have to respectfully disagree with the philosophy, and it's not disagreeing with you because you're just the messenger of what the king has given as an edict as to what the product should be, with it being about the tonight. Because I feel when wrestling was at its best, it was always about the next week. It was about the hooks that made you want to see the next event that was coming up. And I think that's something that now, watching Raw and watching SmackDown, it becomes, okay, well, this was just a nice little event in this little microcosm of the 2 or 3 hours that it aired. But what makes me want to watch next week? What was there that is hooking me in, like soap operas do, like all the other TV shows? I think that's lost in WWE, and I think that maybe like you said, maybe it's Vince saying, all that matters is tonight. Let's put our energy.
I shouldn't say that. It's tonight and next week and the pay-per-view. It's you have to think it like a promoter and not like a storyteller. And like that was hard because a lot of the writers are storytellers, but Vince is a promoter. So it's what's happening tonight. What are you going to put on the marquee, and how are we going to get them to watch the pay-per-view or get them to watch next week? So continuity, as far as like storytelling goes, becomes secondary, right? It's about what you can get people to watch. Now, fair point that they're not doing enough to get people to watch next week. That's a fair enough point.
No, I've noticed that. And I think that that's one of the main things from when wrestling was good, when there was competition with WWF and WCW, that it was, we have to hook in the audience so they're watching us and not watching them. And we're in an era now where we're getting pretty close to there being competition, to ratings evening out between AEW and WWE, that I kind of would like to see a little bit more of that being done, and not so much the cold matches or the rematches that people maybe don't necessarily want to see, those rematches because it's the same match from last week with maybe a handful of different moves, but it's eating up 2 commercial breaks and kind of filling in time. For me, I can't shake hearing that quote from Bruce Pritchard saying that it made it easier for us because we could just put in wrestling and then we don't have to write a show. Again, just my opinion, hence the name of the show. But it's something that, I'm glad I got a little bit of insight from you. So maybe you could let us know, with Impact now, I want to talk to you a little bit about Impact, how the writing and creative process differs from WWE.
Yeah, one of there's a few main differences. One, we don't have Vince McMahon at the helm. You can say that's a good thing or a bad thing. For me as a writer, it's a good thing. Like I said, I'm free to give bad ideas, free to fail. And that's one of the, it's a free creative process. Right. And we can try things. We can try things outside of the box. Scott D'Amore, who's my boss now, is certainly much more reasonable than Vince. So there's that element to it. It's a smaller team, and sometimes that's good, sometimes that's bad. I mean, it never hurts to have more ideas. It is nice to have a smaller team in that, more of your say and more of your vision is going to get on TV, certainly. The other main thing is that we shoot, let's say, 4 weeks of TV at a time. So we're writing at least a month of TV at once. And WWE, it's very like, you write this week and then next week. So the idea of having cohesive storytelling in WWE is just non-existent. And that's because of Vince. When I first got there, we would, you break off in a team and it's like, all right, you guys come up with the 4 weeks of the Roman Reigns, John Cena story or whatever. And so we would come up with a 4-week arc for this story. And by week 1, it's blown up because by week 1, there's so many changes being made to the Raw script that it was just an exercise in creating a month-long story.
And by the end of it, it's Roman Reigns spills coffee on John Cena.
Yeah, right. Your story will never have the arc that you want it to have. Never. It's just, what are you doing this week? Now, what are we doing this week? Now, what are we doing this week? And so at Impact, we have, we're able to play something out. We know something is going to play out for a month. Injuries excluded, that something's going to play out for a month exactly how we wrote it. And so that's nice and that's different. But there's a balance there for long-term storytelling and night of storytelling. Mm-hmm. WWE does that probably better than we do it. If you could take any character that's been in Impact Wrestling since I've been there, and you could follow them week by week by week by week by week by week, and watch their character move along. In WWE, you can't do that. But in WWE, it's very like tonight. You're setting up your main event during the Seg 1 promo. There's a lot of like through threads through the night. And I think sometimes because of our long-term storytelling, we sacrifice our night of storytelling. And so there's a balance there that needs to be reached.
Mm-hmm. But ultimately the goal is reached if it's long-term, because the payoff is the pay-per-view.
You hope, right? You hope, but you want people to tune in for that night too, because the TV's the TV is extremely important as well. So it's got to be a balance.
Mm-hmm. And I'll come back to Impact in a bit, but this past weekend, again, we're probably going to put this episode out a week from now, but so 2 weekends ago, Ring of Honor had Final Battle, which may or may not be their final show. It's a company that's been very good to you, really helped put you on the map. What are your thoughts with the situation right now with Ring of Honor and how they're kind of in limbo? Would you want to comment about that?
Yeah, look, I wish Ring of Honor all the best. Obviously, I spent 10 years there, and it's devastating that, a whole roster of guys are in limbo and don't have jobs. And it's a hard time to be a free agent. WWE is releasing a lot of talent. They're not hiring as many independent wrestlers as they used to hire. So my heart goes out to that roster. As far as the company and the move they're making goes, and I don't know exactly what that is. I can only speculate, to be honest with you. Obviously, I don't think their business model is working. And whatever they do next, and I think they're going to do something. That seems to be the feeling, is that they're going to do something, but whatever they do is going to be way, way scaled down. It's not going to be a company where guys can make six figures anymore. And it's like, that's too bad, but you can't just keep paying guys a bunch of money and running almost no shows and drawing like crap. And, they were hot for a while with the Bucks and Cody and all that in 2014 into not 14, 17, 16, 15, yeah. 16, 17, 18. They were hot, and now they're not, and you got to regroup. So if that means letting go all your talent and figuring out what you can do at budget, that's what they have to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's an interesting thing. Like you said, it's a time now in wrestling where there are a lot of free agents. I just find it nothing short of asinine how WWE has changed their hiring policies. Just to me, it makes absolutely no sense that they no longer want to hire independent wrestlers. I see it almost as if it was like, if the NFL decided, hey, we're not gonna draft college players anymore or people with football experience. We're just gonna take people who've never played the game of football before. They might be great athletes, but now if you want to play in the NFL, you got to have no football experience, and we build you up from scratch. So I kind of find it's really asinine and out of touch with WWE. But we'll see how that goes for them.
Yeah, maybe. Look, they tried this before, and eventually they had to go and start hiring a bunch of indie wrestlers.
Yeah.
Because who else? Who else are they going to get? But I understand what it is. I mean, look, Vince looks at all the guys, all the small and not great in shape independent wrestlers, all the guys that Hunter likes, and Vince goes, "Yeah, that's great, but I need the next John Cena. I need the next Roman Reigns." So I'll go through a bunch of guys that are like marginal or crappy or whatever, because I'm looking for one guy. I'll sift through all the crappy talent to, whatever, NXT 2.0, and I'm not saying they're crappy, but they're not experienced independent wrestlers, a lot of them. I'll sift through all of those if I can find one Roman Reigns, because I build my company around one Roman Reigns, one John Cena, one Hulk Hogan, one Steve Austin, one Bruno Sammartino. That's what I'm looking for. And so I understand that.
Mm-hmm. But I think he's still limiting his pool of talent, because who's to say that the next Roman Reigns, the next that person isn't on the indies, just maybe not somebody who's been given enough buzz and enough spotlight, et cetera, et cetera. I think that person could come from anywhere. Even John Cena. Even John Cena himself, I'm not mistaken, he was a pro wrestler before he was signed to WWE. He had applied himself to a school, and maybe had they not found him quick enough, he would have been on the indies.
Look, and I don't think they're saying no independent wrestlers. I don't think that's what they're saying. I think they're saying we're looking for people that are younger and bigger and guys that have potential to be the guy, as opposed to a bunch of guys that are really good. I'm looking for one star. I'm looking for one magic star, as opposed to a roster of people that are really good.
Mm-hmm. And I know you and I had this conversation the last time we spoke. You gave me some very, very good advice. Maybe we could talk about it again when it comes to Impact Wrestling, since you have the inside view. What is Impact looking for in terms of talent?
I think, look, it's a difficult time now to get a job anywhere, because there's so many free agents. So you're competing with a lot of, the whole Ring of Honor roster you're competing with. You're competing with 100 guys that WWE released, guys that are, TV ready, which is important. In our world, we don't have to have a developmental system. So it helps out if guys have previous television experience. So the best way is to get hired by somebody else and then get fired, or become a star on the independents. Make your buzz. I'm sure I said something like this the last time we talked, to say the best way to get to the next level is to beat the level you're at. And that's what I tell people who want to move on to the next level.
Yeah, and I wish we had stayed in touch in general. But I had thought of a follow-up to that, because, in talking to you, it made a lot of sense. So you said, I believe the word you used was, be the man everywhere you go, and get people talking about you and all of that. And I very much embraced that over, the time since then. Unfortunately, COVID hit not too long after. But it led me to the next dilemma, which I, again, would love to pick your brain about. And that being that, as Canadians, we don't have the same level of exposure here. We can't even legally go wrestle in the United States, risking potentially a 5-year ban if work papers, visas, all those things that are not that easy to acquire aren't in order. And we all know that the biggest exposure comes from the American independent scene, whether it be a GCW, a PWG, all those top companies that get a lot of buzz. We unfortunately don't have that in Canada, and we don't even have the luxury of going there, because they don't really have the pull to get a work visa. So that's where it becomes a bit more of a dilemma for us. And that's something I've been very outspoken about, is that I do consider myself a top level talent. Just that, unfortunately, I'm not born in the right place, nor do I have access to a place that can showcase me with a bright enough spotlight and a big enough stage. So, this is something that I've been struggling with. And, Impact, they do have a Canadian at the helm, but much like a lot of the companies, like even Ring of Honor, there was one Canadian in their company. A company like MLW, 0 Canadians, because they can't get any of us across the border. WWE has fired more Canadians over this past year than they've hired. And if they had fired one Canadian, they would have still fired more Canadians than they've hired. So it's become a thing where Canada's kind of been forgotten about, despite the fact that I think our talent, great talent exists just about everywhere. So I know it's a lot of information. It's something that I'm very passionate about. Just wanted to get your take on that when it comes to, being landlocked here in Canada during these rough times that we're going through.
Yeah, look, it's certainly one more thing that, Canadians have to deal with that Americans don't, let's say. So yes, there's an added stress there. There's an added obstacle. But there's plenty of Canadians that have gotten jobs everywhere. So you go, is it impossible? Nope, it's not impossible. There's just a route you have to take. What's that route? I don't freaking know. I don't know what the route is. but it's not impossible. You go, well, there's this other barrier, so I'm screwed. It's like, no, you're not. Nothing's impossible, because whatever you want to do, you can do. And Kevin Owens is making a ton of money, and so is Sami Zayn, and they did whatever they did to do it, and they were crappy indie wrestlers in Quebec, when they started their careers. We just signed Mike Bailey, who was banned from being in the United States for forever, and for 5 years. We just signed him, and Josh Alexander is our top babyface, and he's a Canadian, and so we have enough Canadians. And if you're good, somebody's gonna look. If you can add value, to somebody's company, and you can prove that you can add value to somebody's company, it's like they'll go through the hoops. Is it a little bit harder as a Canadian? Yes, it is a little bit harder. I can say that even from the inside of Impact Wrestling. It's like, oh, well, this guy's Canadian, so he's not necessarily going to get the same opportunities, because you do have to deal with visa stuff. But it's all there. Life's all there for the taking. It's just a matter of what we do to take it.
Yeah. See, I brought this up in I forget who it was I did one of these interviews with, and I said I find it interesting how it might have been with TJ Wilson. I know it was someone who was Canadian. It might have been Lance Storm. And I said, it's weird how you have these companies, big companies, not to say Impact, but like WWE, for example, big, Fortune 500 companies, where I feel they're not aware of what Canadians have to go through. And the mentality is there are others that have made it. But again, it's others that are making it through, taking a risk, because no one wants to get hit with a 5-year ban like a Mike Bailey for just trying to, go do professional wrestling. But it's like the company's mentality is you guys need to go and do illegal work for us to see that you have value and to be able to get you endorsed on a visa as an exceptional talent to be able to do legal work for us. And that's wherein I feel there's a bit of a flaw in the system that I think there should actually be scouting that's directed towards Canada. That's just my take on it, because I think we have talent that are on par, if not, even better than a lot of people who have been given opportunities. That's been something I've been crusading for, and will continue to do so.
Yeah, I mean, look, here's the truth of it. Your success is nobody's responsibility but yours. Your life is nobody's responsibility but yours. So I can say, I wish this was different. And it's like my mantra in creative in WWE and to an extent in Impact Wrestling is not my show. Because if it was my show, I would do it a certain way, but it's not my show. So if, when you have a wrestling show, if you want to scout Canadian talent, it's like you can do that. But you have to have your show, right? And so whoever should be scouting or isn't scouting, it's like, well, that's their show. If it was my show, I would scout more Canadian talent. It's like, well, not my show. What is my show? Me. I'm my show. I'm responsible for me, my career, my success, my life, in harmony with everything else. Don't get me wrong. I'm not going, I did it all by myself. But to look outside of yourself in hoping that somebody's going to go, oh, yeah, sure, come along. Here, I got you. I'll just, throw you a bone here or whatever. It's like we have to get out of that mentality in our lives in general and go, nobody's responsibility. Nobody's responsibility but mine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, and hence why I make as much noise about it as I do, because I feel that it is a system that is rigged against us.
No, you're talking about the system. It's like, who cares about the system? Who cares? It's like, everything's rigged. It's like, who cares? Do people, it's like people go, life's unfair and it's unjust. It's like, yeah, it is. Of course it is. Now what? That's the question. The question is always, now what? Now what do I do with me? That's what it is. And so if I want a job somewhere, I have to figure out how I can be the best me I can be.
Absolutely.
I can be undeniable, because, this is what we do in life. What we do in life is we put these obstacles, these mental obstacles in front of ourselves. And sometimes those mental obstacles also, they manifest in reality. You go, well, I only have this much money, so I can only do this. Or I only have this much access to something, so I can do this. It's like, yeah, but if you want to make it happen, you'll figure out a way to make it happen. Like that's the true nature of the human spirit. The true nature of the human spirit is to overcome any perceived obstacle that's in front of us to be the thing that we want to be.
No, definitely. I couldn't agree with you more when you say that. I really just, want to bring attention to the fact that some people are of the impression that we have things the same as you guys on the other side. I mean, you're from Michigan, you're almost a Canadian yourself. But when it comes down to it, it's not that same playing field. Not that that's anything other than just another hurdle in the way, like you say. And it's one that, I, for one, intend to overcome and hopefully be able to show others the way. Because if it comes down to it, look, I don't think there's anything standing in the way of someone like me being able to get there and work under somebody like you. I don't think there is. It's really just a case of, helping other people to be able to see that it's possible. So that's been my goal. And hopefully, you and I can stay in touch and we can continue, discussing this more. There are a few things maybe I want to ask you off air, but we are, we've had you on here for a while now. And before letting you go and letting you get on with your day, I did want to give you the chance to talk to the people, tell them where they can find you on social media, any cool projects you got coming up, any shows you got coming up. Let the people know.
Yeah, I'm currently on social media on Instagram under the name Jimmy Jacobs X. I go in and out of social media. I've been off of Twitter for a while. What a freaking cesspool that is. But if I happen to delete my Instagram, you can always go to jimmyjacobs.com and figure out how to find me. My next show is with GCW, with me versus Alex Shelley on January 14th, 20 years after we first wrestled. Bringing it back to Detroit with GCW, Game Changer Wrestling. So I'm looking forward to that. And Impact Wrestling every Thursday night at 8 p.m. Eastern. Our next big show is Hard to Kill on pay-per-view on January 8th.
Awesome. So there you have it. That's where you can follow this wonderful, talented, brilliant individual, Jimmy Jacobs, who we're so fortunate to have had as our guest today here on Jofo in the Ring. You've been an excellent guest, and if ever you want to hop back on with us, we will gladly roll out the red carpet for you, my friend. With that said, I am Jeremy Prophet for Jimmy Jacobs. This has been Jofo in the Ring, where we always like to remind you that wrestling is life.
So, Jofo, I'm a gargle a shot for Kurt Hennig and everybody before we go.
Oh, no.
Jofo, thank you guys.